We live in a world that is full of design. Your life is full of stuff that people designed for a purpose. You look over there, there's a big stone cathedral there. That didn't just happen. Somebody thought that out and people worked together and crafted it with the intent that it would make you feel a certain way when you saw it and when you stepped inside it to worship. Over there, way back there, that's Philadelphia. The Comcast buildings, Liberty Place. Those were designed to project a certain image, to house office space inside them. The interior of buildings, people design them for certain kinds of functionality and comfort. The city of Philadelphia is laid out in a certain way so that it can make it hard to drive through in rush hour or whatever they were trying to do with that thing. Design is everywhere. People design landscapes around buildings to make people gather in certain places or to keep intruders out. There's emergent design in ecosystems where one part helps another part exist. All these things have design, and the design has purpose in it. Heaven has a design, and that design has a purpose. Heaven is a state of being designed by God for the purpose of maximizing the happiness of people. Part one, heaven's form. If we're gonna think good thoughts, that's why we're here, think good thoughts. We gotta talk a little bit about form and design, and how you could say that there's a inner and an outer element to things, and there's like a design inside and a form outside. So like, in a really simplistic example, let's talk about one of the most sacred objects, the blender. The blender is designed to, chop up food. If we talk about the design as being like maybe that inner mechanism, the thing that gears and it spins that chopper, but there's also the form, the shape around it. There's the big plastic cup that allows it to hold and chop up the food. So there's like the design and then the form. A more complex example is like a computer program. So you have the actual code inside the program, but then there's also the form of how you use it, how you interface with it, and it does the thing that it's supposed to do. There's a design that allows for the form to accomplish the use. In a plant, you've got the design, which is the DNA in each cell. There's also the form that the plant takes, because if you follow that DNA, it creates like stems and leaves and everything else that makes plants plant. The same thing in you. You've got DNA in each of your cells. You've heard all the statistics about if you unrolled it, it would reach to the limits of the universe because there's so much in each cell in your body, all that stuff. And that DNA, when followed, dictates how your organs and limbs and hands and skin and everything turns out. That's how it is with heaven. Heaven is both a design, like a way to live, and then a form, an environment that way of life creates. The intent of heaven, though, is not to chop up food. It is to give the human race a happy life. And the form of heaven is made up of the kinds of thoughts and feelings that bring happiness. You could say the design is a code that leads to certain thoughts and feelings, and the environment then that creates, it's like the blender cup, is heaven, as you'd think of it. It's the system of people living happily in an afterlife. It's a way that thoughts and feelings and community is shared that creates this external heaven. And so the more we know about it, the more we can participate in it. This is from Heaven and Hell 201. We need to know what heaven's form is like because it determines not only how angels associate with each other, but also how all their communication takes place. And since all their communication is also an outreach of their thoughts and affections, this means all their intelligence and wisdom. So you can't separate heaven or the people living in heaven from heaven's form. This gets right down into how their minds work. So we've talked about, we're basically trying to lay out heaven's form in this video series. We've talked about it a lot in past videos. So some elements of heaven's form to review. One, heaven exists in fractals. So the whole heaven, we show you this diagram here, saying that there's a first, a middle, and inmost heaven centered around the Lord. That same pattern exists in each community of heaven. There's an inmost and outer layers to it. And within each angel, there is this same pattern happening. Also, what this chart doesn't show is that the full design of heaven and any part of heaven is a human being. So all the functions and forms that happen in the human body, those same analogous things are happening in all those different layers of heaven. In heavenly communities, angels with the deepest love and wisdom live in the center of that heaven, and they send their influence outward. And that's how it is in each town or neighborhood community, and even within each angel's feelings, and within each one of us. There's a point where God reaches into us and connects and gives us life. They're the deepest, most sacred things in us, and then it moves out from there. In heaven, angels who are focused more on goodness and love live along the east-west axis, and angels who are focused more on truth live along the north-south axis. Believe it or not, we did a whole show about that pretty much. So those are some of the features of the design of heaven. And those all are there and are like they are because the divine intent is to provide a happy life for all of us. Give us a life that is driven by and full of the building blocks of happiness, which are heavenly love and heavenly wisdom. And part of that design is that there is a freedom to engage with a design or not to engage with it. Yes, God has put some time and thought into, hey, this is the way that this whole thing can work. Actually, the reason you are like you are, the reason life is, why are human beings, why do we have all the nuances we have? Because we're meant to fit into this design. Like whenever you look out at life and you say, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel how it should be, because it's not. There is a design we're meant to live in. But you have to come into that design in freedom, because nothing that somebody forces you to do or that you don't have an option to not do really becomes a part of you. This is just how it is with anyone. Like people who grow up in a belief system, once they get old enough to think for themselves, unless they grab it for themselves, they get rid of it. Anything, like force somebody to take violin lessons, when they can stop, they will, unless they start to love it for themselves. So freedom is more than we would ever realize. That is what it is to be a human, and you can't ever make something a part of you that you don't do out of love, which is the same thing of saying do out of freedom. There would be a strong encouragement from God for us to opt into the divine design, because just like with any machine, your phone works best when you turn it on. Any complex machine works best when it's used in the way that it was intended to be used. When you're trying to be healthy, we're trying to learn how to be best stewards of our bodies. So you say, oh, well, you learn all this stuff about how it used to be that we would rise with the sun and go to sleep with the sunset. So make sure you don't look at your phone right before bed, even though we all do. This is just us trying to figure out how do you best cooperate with the design of a human being. Similarly, cooperating with how heaven works will open up our minds to heaven and the better, deeper levels of love and wisdom and happiness that come from that. This is how Swedenborg puts it. Heaven and Hell 201, the extent to which we are in heaven's form, or you could say our forms of heaven, determines how wise we are. Just in case you're like, I don't really want heaven's form, here's the perks. Determines how wise we are. It amounts to the same thing whether you say in heaven's form or in heaven's design, since the form of any entity comes from its design and is determined by it. I don't know. I've convinced myself. I want to do this get in heaven's form thing. I wouldn't mind having the communication of all the societies of heaven and God through that into my mind. How are we going to pull that off? How do you opt in to that? Stay tuned. Part 2, how to be in heaven's form. Heaven's form is good. How we get that thing rolling. This is how Swedenborg says to do it. Heaven and Hell 202. One thing needs to be said first. Okay, say it. Namely, what it is to be in heaven's form. We have been created in the image of heaven and in the image of this world. Our inner being in the image of heaven and our outer in the image of this world. Whether you say in the image or according to the form, it amounts to the same thing. He explains elsewhere to be in the form, for example, he says our outer being, your body, is in the form of the world because it is adapted or suited to or responsive to the world. Your ears, your ears have like wrinkles in them, like bumps. It's not just because they would look weird if they were flat. It's because acoustics, baby. That captures the sound waves optimally. Your eyes have the liquid in the depth they do so that they try to capture a light that gets all responsive to what's around us. So we're in the image of the world. Your inner being is in the image of heaven. Okay, there, you did it. So we're all created in the image of heaven inside. Why are there so many problems in the world? Why are people acting not heavenly? And why does it not feel like heaven to be in ourselves all the time? Well, it's because it's all messed up. However, Swedenborg goes on, since by the evils of our intention and the distortions of our thinking, we have destroyed the image and therefore the form of heaven within us. By the way, in case you're feeling like, hey man, don't say that I have evils in my intention. Well, first of all, Swedenborg says everybody does. That just ego itself is what he would call evils. But also this process he's describing here, where that stuff got destroyed, that happened over generation after generation. Like the human race over thousands of years has destroyed this form in us. And people have done some good things, but overall there's been a downward slide as love of dominion over other people and materialism took over the human mind. Okay, so that's how we got where we are. And in its place have imported the image and form of hell. Our inner being is closed from the time of birth. So it's in there, but it's closed off. This is why we, unlike all other kinds of animal, are born into utter ignorance. Little baby sea turtles know how to go for the ocean and swim off. You've seen that a million times. But we don't know anything when we're born. And Swedenborg says especially that we don't have the right instincts about what's right and wrong. You get into like a classroom of 4-year-olds and they do some nice things to each other, but also you gotta keep them separated. That's because there's not as automatic goodness. We don't have the instincts. If we were in the form of heaven, as sure as little sea turtles head for the sea, right, when they hatch out of their eggs, we would head for what's good and true. Wouldn't that be cool? If people were just automatically wanting to be pushed like from their own heart to want to be good and kind of like, whoa, what are you talking about with evil? We're way far away from that though right now. What a mess. Can it be fixed? Yes. The answer is yes. You probably thought I was going to say that. This is how Swedenborg describes it. 202. However, for the image or form of heaven to be restored for us, we need to be educated in the principles of the design. For the form, as explained above, depends on the design. That's why we bother in all these videos, just telling you all these little parts of how heaven is, because how we get back into design is to understand it and learn it. And where's the place that we really get educated from? Like where's the curriculum or the instruction manual for how to get back in the divine design? Swedenborg says, the Word contains all the laws of the divine design. For the laws of the divine design are the precepts we find there. To the extent that we know them and live by them, I was about to go into this explanation of what the Word is, but I think I'll finish the quote, because I know you're already reading ahead. Stop reading. To the extent that we know them and live by them, our inner being is opened, and in it the design or form of heaven is formed anew. So the Word's got all the information that we need. What is the Word? The short answer would be the Bible. That's what Swedenborg means when he says the Word. That within the Bible, the reason God decided that he's going to make the Bible through the agency of human beings and the printing press and providence is because it is what is that thing? It's the instructions on how to get back in the divine design. So we can be in heaven's form by living according to what's in the Word. Not everything in the Bible seems clear how you would live by that. There are places, though, that have been very influential in that book that do give you ways to live. You got the 10 Commandments. You got the 2 great commandments, love the Lord, love your neighbor. These are core principles which exist in actually in every religion. You've probably seen, we'll put a graphic up of it, like the many versions of the golden rule that exist in all the world's religions. So even though there is this full and complete set of instructions in the Bible, which is, by the way, what Swedenborg was doing with just about all of his revelatory phase, which was unpacking all those instructions that are in there, some of which, as I said, are on the surface, but others, you need to know the language of correspondences to get in there. That's a pretty important thing, but it's not the exclusive place. The Bible is not the only place where the word happens. There are parts of the word in a lot of different traditions. Actually, nature was the word originally. It's divine truth, all the laws of the design, wherever they show up. Wherever the laws of heaven are written and can be learned by a person, there you have some of the word. Part 3, the perks of heaven's form. So right now I'm like knocking on your door. Hey, can I sell you heaven's form? And you're like, no, thanks. We're eating dinner right now. I don't really want to hear your pitch for heaven's. I'm like, wait. There's really good perks. Let me tell you about the perks. This is from Heaven and Hell 203. To the extent that people are in heaven's form, they are in heaven. Hello, do you want to be in? This is a pretty good perk. To the extent that people are in heaven's form, they are in heaven. And in fact, are in fact a heaven in least form. How would you like to not just be in heaven, but be heaven? Man. Further, they live in intelligence and wisdom to that same extent. Took great intelligence to flub that word there. Yeah. So you get to be in heaven, and have intelligence and wisdom. That's what the form does for you. There's a perk of greater intelligence and wisdom, but that is not just an arbitrary reward from God for a good behavior. It's not like, I'm God and I have a bucket of intelligence and wisdom here, and I see on your chart over there that you lived in the design of heaven, so I'm going to choose to give you some. The design of heaven's form is like an antenna. It getting us arranged like that, living by the commandments, opens you up to the heaven that's already there trying to get in. This is Heaven and Hell 203. All of the thought of our intellect and all the affection of our will reach out round about us in heaven according to its form and communicate wonderfully with the communities there, and they in turn communicate with us. It's because it makes it so you can suddenly tap into the heaven network. We sort of think of the materialist view of thought is that you're like a little mini nuclear generator generating power for your house, and you're not connected to an electric grid. But actually, in reality, we are connected to a grid, to like a thoughts and feelings grid. And heaven is like majorly upgrading your electrical box. Is that okay? Doing that, tapping into this network of heavenly thoughts and feelings enhances everybody's life and increases everybody's wisdom that participates in that collective. Okay, that's a little bit weird. Swedenborg actually knew that this would sound weird to people when he was writing it, because it just seems like thoughts and feelings are, that's the thing that happens inside your head, isolated. The reality he claims to have seen in his experience is that your mind reaches out and interacts with things in the spiritual world. Like your mind is influenced by the spiritual world around it, just like we're influenced by the physical world around us. Think about the act of seeing. Yes, the actual processing of the visual information is taking place inside your head, but you're seeing stuff that's out there. Somebody can rearrange this room and it would totally change what I see, because the light rays themselves start wherever, in whatever light bulb or in the sun, then bounce off the thing. It's a total influence of what's around you. So through our eyesight, we're reaching out in a way to the objects outside us and interacting with whatever's on them or whatever's going on with them that we see. Your intellect, your thoughts are spiritual sight. In the spiritual world, and in your own spirit, in your consciousness, your thoughts are actually reaching out like sight to interact with communities and people that are around you. You're like observing the spiritual world around you and the patterns of love and wisdom that are around the people that you're around, and that is affecting how you think. Swedenborg actually witnessed newcomers in the afterlife having a hard time believing that their minds were connected with other people, so they got a really visceral demonstration.
There was one particular spirit who believed that he thought independently, that is, without any outreach beyond himself and therefore communication with the surrounding communities. So that he might learn that he was wrong, he was deprived of any communication with nearby communities. As a result, he not only lost the power of thinking, but actually collapsed lifelessly, just flailing his arms like a newborn baby. In a little while, the communication was restored, and bit by bit, as it was restored, he returned to his usual state of thinking.
Flailing like a little baby. That's what you get if you disconnect from your communities. That's the way that the human form works. Just there's nothing in your body that can survive out there. It has to have all the everything, information, energy, action in the body has to be shared for it to work. It's the same way that heaven is. Heaven, your body is just a physical version of the design of heaven. So all the minds in heaven, like all the cells in the body, are connected. They share spiritual information. They share energy with each other. They share action with each other. It doesn't mean that people in heaven are not still individuals, just like there's very clearly individual cells in the body, and there's all different kinds of cells in the body. Each of us participates in our own way in heaven. This is from Heaven and Hell 204. We need to realize that intelligence and wisdom vary for individuals depending on the communication. For people whose intelligence and wisdom are formed from things genuinely good and true, there is a sharing with communities according to heaven's form. So how much love and wisdom you have is not like something that comes from deep in. This is how much you're connecting to heaven. So the more that we choose to base our life on the essence of heaven itself, which is the unselfish love of what's good and true, or you could say of God and the neighbor, then that forms what's in us. Our inner design connects with heaven, and we become more a part of heaven, which has this positive feedback loop where it inspires us to take more actions like that. You can go the other way, though. If you're focusing more on what can I get for myself, and I don't care how that affects other people, that's the opposite of heaven. That messes with the connection. This is 204. For people whose intelligence and wisdom are not formed from things genuinely good and true, the communication is intermittent and only partially coherent, because it is not with communities in the sequence characteristic of heaven's form. So you can still, if you're more self-focused, you can still communicate with heaven a bit, but you got static in there, because you're not trying to accomplish what heaven's, you're not in the design. And if we get really absorbed in selfishness, you actually start to network instead with hell. There's communities out there. Hell is just everybody in the afterlife who is not into the design of heaven and wants to focus on themselves at the expense of others. So as we start to be more like that, we start to have our minds reach out to communities of people who are into that same stuff, which Swedenborg calls hell. And we get more and more enmeshed and entwined with those communities depending on how intentional our selfishness is. However, you can always untangle yourself if you want. This is what spiritual growth is. This is what, repentance, self-examination, regeneration, reformation, all that stuff is. And it's the journey of life. It's getting aware of, am I networking with hell right now? Is my spirit looking out and seeing what hell is like and like, okay, I like that. Okay, I noticed that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to resist that and wait until I feel myself networking with heaven. And then I'm going to follow that. And every time we do that, we become more and more in the design of heaven and become more and more connected to heaven. And if heaven sounds a little overwhelming, because of all the communication that you're getting in there and all of the connection and all that. It's not a sensory overload. It doesn't feel like, whoa, this person and this person. It's actually kind of mild. This is from 204. It should be known that this sharing with communities is not something that comes to the overt perception of the people involved in it, but is a communication with the quality in which they participate and which reaches out from them. So it's connecting with like the essence of who they are. It's this moderated system that holds everything we could ever need, but we access it in the way that we can handle and in the way that makes us feel great, makes us feel like, we're in heaven. So you want to get some thoughts from heaven. That's great. Actually, go for it. That's what you're made to have. There's tons of them out there. There's tons. There's never ending supply of those. The way that you can access that is to get into the form of heaven, is to participate in the design of heaven, which is living by the precepts in the Word, which will put you into the form of heaven, which then connects you to everything. And that's something we can be working on right now. It's just taking those spiritual principles that you learn and making them a priority, more and more having them guide the way that you act and make decisions, and then coming to love them and love the effects that they have on the world. Doing that gets our spirit more and more aligned with the bigger form of heaven. And then once it's aligned, it's like, okay, we've got the antenna up, and now all this stuff that was there can come into us and change us. And it can happen right now. I definitely feel like in my life, I get more kind of heavenly thoughts than I did 10 years ago even. But after death, you really get to feel the effects of that. Swedenborg says that a lot of the spiritual growth we have, you get like a little sense of it now, but after death, like all that time and money, and decision making you invested really blossoms. So this is a process that's just going to keep paying dividends. It's a good form. Now they're convinced you. Do you want to buy a copy of the form? Okay, it's free. All you got to do is just like go and live by what's good and true, and you'll be thinking heaven thoughts.